There was a newspaper in Bangkok in September of 1969 that printed a challenge on page 7. The challenge was 84 words long. It was written by a woman, and the woman, when she wrote it, was 53 fights into a professional career that had no losses. Her name was Lek Wattana. She was 5 feet 7 inches tall, 82 kilograms, 27 years old. She had been fighting in private Bangkok gyms since the age of 13, because in 1969, the sanctioned Thai stadiums did not permit women to compete. Rajadamnern would not allow a woman to step onto its canvas. Lumpinee would not either. The official Thai boxing world, in the year I am describing, did not acknowledge that women like Lek existed. But she did exist. And she fought. She fought in places that did not appear on any tourist map. Private clubs, industrial buildings in Thonburi, warehouses behind temples. The Bangkok fight community, the trainers, the bookmakers, the serious watchers, knew her name. The Bangkok public did not. On a Tuesday morning in September of 1969, she sat down with a reporter from a sports paper, and she dictated 84 words. She did it without a manager, without a promoter, without permission from anyone. The paper printed the 84 words on a Thursday. They were translated into Cantonese and reprinted in 2 Hong Kong papers within 4 days. I read the translation on a Saturday morning. I folded the paper. I placed it beside my coffee. I said nothing to anyone in the room. 14 days later, I was in Bangkok. I walked into the building where she fought. I sat in the 3rd row. She looked at me across the floor. She said one sentence in Thai. 247 people laughed. 8 seconds after she stopped laughing, her trainer said 3 words from the corner. The entire room went silent. This is the story of those 8 seconds, and of the 84 words that made them possible. To understand what happened in a Thonburi warehouse on the night of September 14th, 1969, you must understand 3 things. The first is the city itself. Bangkok, in the autumn of 1969, was a city living in 2 times at once. On its surface, the boulevards near the river, the hotels along Silom, the bars on Pat Pong filled with American servicemen on leave from Vietnam. It was a modern Southeast Asian capital, drinking US dollars and selling rice and electronics to a war economy that paid in cash. Beneath that surface, an older Bangkok continued, the Bangkok of temples, of trade guilds, of fight gyms run by men whose grandfathers had been fight trainers, of private circuits that operated parallel to the official world and acknowledged none of its rules. The fight circuits were everywhere. Lumpinee Stadium was the famous one. Rajadamnern was the historical one. But beneath those 2 stadiums, there were perhaps 40 private venues across Bangkok where serious fighters fought serious fights for serious money, and where the audience was composed not of tourists, but of practitioners. The second thing is that women were not permitted in the sanctioned ring. This was not informal, it was rule. In 1969, a woman was forbidden by tradition from touching the canvas at Lumpinee, not only as a fighter, but as a spectator who entered the ring after a bout. The belief held that a woman's presence on the canvas would weaken the spirits that protected the fighters. Whether anyone in 1969 still believed this in the literal sense was beside the point. The rule existed. It was enforced. It would not be relaxed for another half-century. So women like Lek fought elsewhere. They fought in the private circuit, in converted warehouses, in rooms behind restaurants, in gymnasiums rented by the hour. The matches were not sanctioned. They had no official records, but they had real fighters, real betting, real money, and real injuries. And the best of those fighters, in the autumn of 1969, was Lek Wattana. The third thing is who she was. Her trainer was a man named Arthit Buakhao. He had been training fighters in the Thonburi district for 23 years before Lek walked into his gym. He had refused, in those 23 years, to train any woman. He believed, like most trainers of his generation, that the body of a woman could not be conditioned to the level required by serious Muay Thai. Lek had come to his gym at the age of 13. He had told her to leave. She had returned the next day. He had told her to leave. She had returned for 7 consecutive days. On the 8th day, Arthit had said, "If I train you, you will never be able to compete at Lumpinee. You will never have an official record. You will be paid less than half of what the men are paid. You will fight in warehouses for 15 years, and at the end of 15 years, no boxing book in the world will have your name in it. "Do you understand this?" She had answered, "Yes." He had said, "Then we begin tomorrow at 5 in the morning." She was 13. She did not miss a morning for the next 14 years. By the autumn of 1969, she was 27. Her private circuit record stood at 53 wins, 0 losses, 29 wins by stoppage. She had fought in 12 different warehouses across Bangkok. She had beaten 3 Burmese champions, 1 Cambodian, 1 Laotian, and 48 Thai men who had taken bouts against her, either out of curiosity or for the prize money, or both. The men who had fought her once almost never fought her twice. She had run out of opponents. That was the situation when she walked into a tea shop with a sports reporter on a Tuesday morning in September and dictated her 84 words. The 84 words were these: "I have fought 53 times. I have not lost. I have submitted this challenge to every fighter in Thailand worth submitting it to, and none of them has answered. So I am submitting it now to the one name outside Thailand that people in this city keep saying I should be afraid of: Bruce Lee. If you are real, come to the building behind Wattana on the 14th. I will be there. So will the men who matter." The reporter printed it on Thursday. It reached Hong Kong by Monday. I read it on Saturday. I bought my airline ticket the same Saturday afternoon. I bought it under a name that was not mine. I paid in Hong Kong dollars at a small travel office on Nathan Road. The ticket was for Thai Airways, Hong Kong to Bangkok, departing Friday, September 12th. One way. I did not tell anyone I was going. I packed 1 canvas bag. I included a thermos for jasmine tea, 2 changes of clothes, a notebook, and $200 in cash in my front trouser pocket. I arrived at Don Muang Airport at 11:18 a.m. on September 12th. I took a taxi to a small hotel near the Chao Phraya River. The hotel was called the River View, although the river was 4 blocks away and could only be seen from the rooftop. The room rate was $4 a night. The desk clerk did not ask for identification. I paid for 4 nights in cash. On the first day, I walked. I walked for 9 hours. I went to 3 gyms in different parts of the city, one in Pathum Wan, one in Thonburi, one in Bang Lampu. I did not enter any of them. I stood across the street from each. I watched who entered. I watched who left. I watched the equipment being carried in and out, the body language of the fighters, the way the trainers stood at the doors and looked at the people walking past. This is something I have done in every city I have ever fought or trained in. Before you understand a fight community, you must first understand its geography. You must know which doors are guarded and which are not. You must know which gyms send their fighters home with bruised eyes and which do not. The gym is a face. The face tells the truth. On the second day, September 13th, I went to the warehouse. The 84-word challenge had named only a landmark, the building behind Wat Arun. Wat Arun is the temple on the west bank of the Chao Phraya, the one with the porcelain spire that catches the light at sunrise. Behind Wat Arun, in 1969, was a stretch of small industrial buildings, most of them owned by a man named Somchai, who ran underground betting on private bouts. I found the building at 2:31 p.m. It was a converted warehouse, 2 stories tall, with no signs and no markings. The door faced an alley. I stood across the alley for 47 minutes. I watched the building. I counted the doors. I noted the windows on the 2nd floor. I identified 2 emergency exits, one at the back, one on the side. I memorized the layout the way I had learned to memorize the layout of any space I might need to exit in a hurry. I did not approach the door. On the afternoon of the 14th, I went to a tea house 3 blocks from the warehouse. I sat at a small table near the window. I ordered 1 cup of jasmine tea. I drank it slowly. The woman behind the counter was perhaps 65. She watched me from across the room. After 10 minutes, she walked over. She said, in slow English, "You are not from Bangkok." I said, "Hong Kong." She said, "You are here for the fight." I said, "How did you know?" She said, 3 people have come into my shop today and ordered tea and looked at the wall clock the same way you are looking at it. They are all going to the building. You are going too. I smiled. I said, "Have you heard of Lek Wattana?" She said, "Everyone in Thonburi has heard of Lek." I said, "Have you seen her fight?" She said, "Twice. The first time, she beat a man from Chiang Mai in 7 minutes. The second time, she fought a Burmese fighter who had won 40 professional fights. He stopped fighting in the fourth round. He sat down on the floor of the rope square. He would not get up. She did not hit him to make him sit. She had simply stood across from him for 2 minutes and looked at him. And he had sat down. And he had said, in Burmese, "I cannot find her." I asked, "What did he mean?" "I cannot find her." She said, "I do not know what he meant." The man translating said it that way. But Lek understood. She bowed to him. She helped him stand. She walked out of the warehouse with him and bought him a meal. He went back to Burma the next morning. He has not fought since. I thanked her. I paid for the tea. I left a 20 baht tip on a 4 baht bill. I walked to the warehouse. I arrived at 7:43 p.m. The fight was scheduled for 9 p.m. I paid the 80 baht entrance fee at the door. The man at the door did not speak English. He counted my bills. He waved me in. I walked across the warehouse floor. The ring was a rope square laid out on the polished wooden floor. No canvas, no platform, no ropes around posts. Just a square of rope, perhaps 18 feet on each side, lying on the floor. The crowd was seated on benches and folding chairs around the rope. I counted them. 247. I sat in the third row, on a wooden bench, third seat from the left aisle. I crossed my arms on my knees. I looked at the rope square. And I waited. Lek entered at 8:18 p.m. She came in through a side door, alone except for Arthit. She wore red shorts and a black training top. She was taller than the photographs in the Hong Kong newspaper had suggested, 5'7", perhaps an inch more. Her muscle was the muscle of a worker, not the muscle of an athlete posing for a camera. It was distributed across her shoulders, her back, her thighs, in the way that physical labor distributes muscle, functional, asymmetric in the small ways that real labor produces asymmetry, with no part of her body looking decorative. She did not look at the crowd. She looked at the rope square. She began to warm up at 8:21 p.m. I watched her for the next 22 minutes. This is not an exaggeration. I did not blink more often than was necessary. I did not look at the crowd. I did not look at Arthit, who stood at the corner post, watching her with the focused attention of a trainer who had watched her warm up 1,000 times before, but had not become tired of watching. I did not look at the people seated near me, several of whom were now beginning to wonder what kind of audience member sits in the third row of a private fight in plain clothes and does not move for 20 minutes. I watched only her. In the first 10 minutes, she did basic movement, footwork drills, hip rotations, the slow rehearsal of strikes at quarter speed that every serious fighter does to prepare the body's neural pathways for the speed it will require. In the next 12 minutes, she did the combination. The combination was the 3-strike sequence that Arthit had built around her physical attributes across 14 years of training. Left body kick, right elbow, knee. She threw it twice in shadow, 4 times against pads held by Arthit at the corner, 3 more times in shadow. The first time I saw it, I watched her foot. The second time, I watched her hip. The third time, I watched her elbow. The fourth time, I had stopped watching the technique. I was watching her left shoulder. Because the left shoulder rolled back. A quarter second before the left body kick began, before the hip rotation, before the weight transfer, before any of the visible mechanics that an opponent in the ring would be reading, her left shoulder rolled back approximately 1.5 inches. It was a small movement. It was an unconscious movement. It was the kind of small, unconscious movement that you would have to be looking for specifically to see, and that you would only know to look for if you had been watching the same movement repeat 7 times, with the same preparation, in the same sequence. I had been watching. I had counted 7 repetitions. The shoulder had rolled back on every one. She did not know she was doing it. Arthit did not know he had trained her to do it. It had been drilled into her body so deeply that it had become invisible to both of them. They had practiced the kick 10,000 times. They had practiced the preparation without knowing they were practicing it 10,000 times also. This is a principle I have written about in private. It is a principle I have never spoken aloud, because the principle is uncomfortable for fighters to hear. The principle is this: the preparation has been practiced as many times as the technique itself. The higher the level of training, the more readable the preparation becomes. Because the preparation is rehearsed every time the technique is rehearsed. Because the preparation is, in a real sense, part of the technique. The fighter who has thrown 10,000 left kicks has also rolled his shoulder back 10,000 times. The shoulder is consistent. Consistent is readable. Readable from the right distance is fatal. At 8:43 p.m., during a pause between warm-up rounds, Lek looked across the floor. She looked at me. She did not recognize me. She turned to Arthit. She said something in Thai. She said it loudly enough that the front 4 rows heard her. Her voice carried in the way that confident voices carry in rooms with bad acoustics. The Thai sentence, I would learn the translation later, was, "I wrote the challenge for Bruce Lee, not a tourist." 247 people laughed. I did not laugh. I looked at her with the same attention I had been holding for 40 minutes. Neither hostile nor warm. The attention of a man who is still reading the page. Arthit, in the corner, did not laugh. Arthit was looking at me. And Arthit, for the first time in 23 years of training fighters, was uncertain about what he was seeing. The laughter had not fully settled when Lek walked toward the 3rd row. She did not move aggressively. She walked the way a host walks toward a guest who has shown up at the wrong door. Relaxed, curious, faintly amused. She stopped at the rope barrier between the floor seating and the rope square. She was 8 feet from me. She put her hands on her hips. She said, in accented English, "You come for the card?" I said, "I came for the challenge." The laughter that had not fully dissipated stopped dissipating. She said, "The challenge was for Bruce Lee." I said, "I know." A 4-second pause. She looked at me more carefully. She said, "You are Bruce Lee." It was not a question. I said, "Yes." She stood with this for 11 seconds. She looked at the 247 people watching the exchange. She looked at Arthit. She looked back at me. She said, "Then come up." I stood. I stood the way ordinary people stand, without performance, without drama. I stepped over the rope barrier. The crossing of a rope on a wooden floor is not a dramatic crossing. I walked across the floor toward the rope square. The sound of my footsteps on the wood was the only sound in the room. The 247 people were no longer producing the noise they had been producing 4 minutes earlier. The noise had shifted, not louder, more focused. The specific quality of crowd sound that occurs when an audience has realized something unexpected is happening and has stopped looking at each other in order to look only at the floor. I reached the rope square. I stopped at its edge. I looked at Lek's stance, feet shoulder width, weight slightly forward, hands held high in the orthodox Muay Thai guard. I looked at her hands. I looked at her left shoulder. Arthit saw me look at the shoulder. Arthit walked to the corner post. He stood very still. He was watching me with the attention of a man who has just confirmed something he had suspected. Lek threw a diagnostic left body kick. It was not the combination. It was a test kick, slower than her full kick, designed to read distance and timing. I slipped it. 4 inches of lateral movement. The kick passed through the space I had occupied a fraction of a second earlier. She reset. She threw a right cross. Fast, committed, real speed. The cross passed over my right ear, close enough that the people in the front row could hear the air move against my hair. I had not retreated. Her jaw set. The small involuntary change in expression that occurs when a fighter has received information they were not expecting, and the body has not yet been given instructions about how to respond. She went to the combination. Second one. Her left shoulder rolled back. The quarter-second tell. I had been waiting for it for 40 minutes and 23 seconds. Second 2. Her left hip began its rotation. The kick was loading. Her weight transferred to her right foot. I began to move. I did not move backward. I did not move sideways in the direction Lek was expecting. I moved forward, 11 inches forward, on a 30-degree angle inside the kick's developing arc. Second 3. Her left leg lifted. The kick was committed, traveling at full speed toward the space where I had been standing. I was no longer there. I was 11 inches forward and 4 inches to her right. The kick passed behind me by the width of 2 fingers. Second 4. Her body was now committed to the rotation of the combination. Her hip was past her front foot. Her balance was structured for the elbow, the second strike, to follow the kick. But the kick had not landed. The combination's geometry was built on the assumption that the first strike would either land on her opponent's body or make contact with the opponent's guard. Neither had happened. Her elbow began to launch anyway. The combination was automatic, 16 years of training had made it involuntary. The body had been told to do 3 things in sequence, and the body was doing them. Second 5. I raised my right hand. I did not block the elbow. I did not strike. I placed 2 fingers, index and middle, closed together, palm down, against the collar of her training top. Not a grab, not a pull, a placement. The deliberate contact of someone marking a location. My other hand was at my side. Second 6. Her elbow stopped. Not because I had stopped it, because she had. The body knows when the position has been lost. The elbow halted mid-launch. The knee, the third strike, never began. She stood in the center of the rope square with her combination half executed. 2 fingers were at her collar. Her left foot was forward. Her balance was past her front foot. Her elbow was suspended, 3 inches into its arc, frozen. She had not been struck. She had not been thrown. She had not been touched anywhere on her body except by 2 fingers at her collar. But she had been completely, structurally, geometrically caught. Second 7. I held the 2 fingers there for 1 second. Then I removed them. I stepped back, 1 step. My hands lowered to my sides. Second 8. She straightened. She did not stumble. She did not fall. She did not show any external sign of imbalance. She simply straightened, the way a fighter straightens when an exchange has ended. She looked at me. I looked at her. Neither of us spoke. The room was silent. Not the gradual reduction of crowd noise as attention focuses. The immediate, total silence of 247 people producing no sound simultaneously. The kind of silence that replaces noise the way darkness replaces light when a switch is thrown. And then Arthit's voice came from the corner. He did not project. He did not raise his voice. He spoke quietly to the fighter standing beside him at the corner post. But in the silence, the quiet voice traveled. He said 3 words. Nankyu Bruce Lee. That is Bruce Lee. The fighter beside Arthit heard them. The man beside that fighter heard them. The people in the front row heard them. The 3 words moved through the room the way a sound moves through still water, outward in every direction, reaching every part of the space within seconds. Lek heard the 3 words, but she had known for 11 seconds. She bowed. It was not the bow of a defeated fighter. It was not the formal bow of ceremony. It was the bow of a student who has received something from a teacher. The bow that acknowledges the receiving with the full weight of what it means. I returned the bow, and the 247 people in the warehouse began to applaud. Not the explosive applause of a crowd responding to a finish. Something slower and more sustained. The applause of people who have watched something they understand the value of and are acknowledging it with the seriousness it deserves. Lek did not leave the rope square immediately. She stood there for perhaps 20 seconds, looking at me. Then she gestured toward a doorway at the far end of the warehouse. She said, "Tea?" I said, "Yes." The doorway led to a small training room, a back room with 3 wooden stools, a low table, a clay teapot on a propane burner, and 4 hooks on the wall with sets of hand wraps hanging from them. Arthit followed us. He closed the door behind him. The applause from the warehouse was still going. Lek sat on 1 stool. I sat on another. Arthit sat on the 3rd. The pot of tea on the propane burner began to whistle. Arthit took it off the burner. He poured 3 cups. He handed 1 to me. He handed 1 to Lek. He kept 1 for himself. Lek drank. Then she looked at me. She asked, in English, "What did you see?" I said, "Your shoulder." She said, "My shoulder?" I said, "It rolls back a 1/4 second before your left kick, approximately 1.5 inches. It is not large, but it is consistent. You have done it on every left kick I watched in your warm-up. 7 repetitions, 7 rolls." She looked at Arthit. Arthit was very still. He said, in English, slowly, because his English was not as fluent as Lek's, "I have trained her for 16 years. I have stood in the corner for every fight. I have watched 10,000 left kicks. I did not see the shoulder." I said, "You were too close." He said, "Too close?" I said, "The corner is for instruction during the round. The corner is not for reading preparation. The preparation is small. The preparation is unconscious. The preparation is visible at a distance the corner does not provide. I was 40 feet away for 40 minutes. From 40 feet, The shoulder is loud. From the corner, it is silent. Arthit set his teacup down on the low table. He did this slowly, the way a man sets a cup down when he has just heard something that has rearranged the inside of his head, and his hands need to do something simple while the head finishes its rearranging. Lek asked the harder question. She said, "Can it be fixed?" I was quiet for a long moment. Then I said, "It can be hidden, but hiding it will make the kick slower by approximately 7/100ths of a second. You will need to decide which matters more, the speed of the kick or the invisibility of the preparation." Most fighters choose the speed because most opponents cannot read preparation at this level of subtlety. You have fought 53 times and no one has read it. That is not because the shoulder is hidden. It is because the men who have been across from you have been in the ring with you, not in the third row before the fight. Lek smiled for the first time that evening. She said, "Then I should not change the shoulder. I should change the men I let watch me before they fight me." I laughed. It was the first laugh in the room. Arthit, after a pause, laughed too. It was a quiet laugh. The laugh of a man who has been carrying something heavy for 16 years and has just been told he can set part of it down. We talked for 47 minutes. I asked her about the private circuit, about how many female fighters there were across Bangkok. She said 31 were currently active, perhaps another 40 had retired in the past decade. About what they were paid, between 200 and 800 baht per fight, which in 1969 was roughly 10 to 40 US dollars. About the betting, mostly honest at the warehouse where we were sitting, less honest at 2 other venues she named. About the men who arranged the matches, 3 intermediaries, 2 of whom she did not trust and would not work with after 1970. She did not ask me about my films. She did not ask me about Hong Kong. She did not ask me about the future of martial arts, or any of the questions I had grown accustomed to being asked by people who recognized my face. She asked me only about fighting, about what I had seen in her shoulder, about what other tells I had identified in her hip and her chin, about whether the combination could be modified to begin from a different originating muscle group, about whether the speed loss of 7/100ths of a second could be recovered through other modifications elsewhere in the sequence. I answered every question. I drew diagrams on the wooden table with my finger dipped in tea. Arthit watched the diagrams. He committed them to memory. When the tea diagrams evaporated, he asked me to draw them again. I drew them 3 times in total. At 11:14 p.m., I stood. I said, in the Thai I had practiced on the airplane, "Kap kun krap." Thank you. I bowed to Arthit. He returned the bow more deeply than he had bowed to any other man in 23 years. I bowed to Lek. She returned the bow with the same depth she had given me in the rope square. At the door of the training room, she said one more thing. She said, "You will not tell anyone." It was not a question. I said, "No." She said, "Why?" I said, "Because the challenge was in the newspaper. Your answer to the challenge is private. The two should not be mixed. The newspaper was public because that is what you chose. The conversation here is private because that is what we are choosing now." She nodded. I walked out through the warehouse. The 247 people had largely dispersed. A few remained, drinking, talking quietly, settling bets. I walked across the wooden floor and out through the alley door. I walked back to my hotel. I never saw Lek Wattana again. Lek fought 14 more times in the private circuit after that night. She won all 14. She retired in 1972 at the age of 30. Her final private circuit record was 67 wins, 0 losses, 36 wins by stoppage. She did not give interviews about the night of September 14th, 1969. When journalists asked her, and they did, twice, both times after my death in 1973, she gave them one sentence in Thai. Mai mi kam nai, pasa Thai ja atibai, sing ti chan hen mil kao. There are no words in Thai to describe what I saw his hands do. She would not say more. The journalists tried different approaches, different questions, different framings. They asked about the combination, about the 2 fingers, about the 3 words from the corner. Her answer was always the same sentence. Then she changed the subject. Arthit continued training fighters for 19 more years. He retired in 1988. In those 19 years, he produced 7 fighters who reached major sanctioned circuit cards at Lumpinee and Rajadamnern, a rate roughly 3 times his previous 23-year average. He was, by the time of his retirement, considered one of the 4 or 5 most respected trainers in the Bangkok fight community. He changed one thing in his coaching method after September 14th. Before every fight in which he was preparing a fighter to face a new opponent, he sent an assistant to watch the opponent's previous bout, not from ringside, not from the corner, but from the 3rd row. The assistant would return with notes on the opponent's shoulder, hip, and chin tells in the quarter-second before each technique began. When asked, decades later, where he had learned this method, Arthit said only, "From a man who came to watch Lek fight." He never named the man. He died in 2003. He was 81 years old. At his funeral, a younger trainer he had mentored asked his widow if there were any unpublished writings in his belongings. She said there was one, a single sheet of paper kept in a wooden box on his desk. It contained one sentence, written in his handwriting, in English, underlined twice. The sentence was, "The preparation has been practiced as many times as the technique itself." The widow placed the sheet of paper in the box. The box was buried with him. The 84-word newspaper challenge was archived by the Bangkok sports paper that originally printed it. The original Thursday edition, page 7, still exists in the National Library of Thailand. The Cantonese translation, the version I read on a Saturday morning in Hong Kong, was kept by the translator's family until 2007, when it was sold to a private collector in Singapore. The collector has not made it public. I flew back to Hong Kong on the morning of September 16, 1969. I did not mention the trip to anyone. I resumed work on the film I was preparing, a film that would, 2 years later, change my life and the lives of many people who had never heard of me. I did not write about the warehouse in any letter, any interview, any public document. 2 weeks after returning, in a training notebook I kept in the bottom drawer of my desk, I wrote one sentence and underlined it. The same sentence Arthit would underline 34 years later in a wooden box. The preparation has been practiced as many times as the technique itself. The notebook entered private storage after my death in 1973. The drawer has not been opened, and the woman, Lek Wattana, is still alive. As I tell you this story, she is 84 years old. She lives in a small house in Thonburi province, outside Bangkok, with her 2 adult children and 4 grandchildren. She still trains, lightly, every morning at 6. She drinks 1 cup of jasmine tea afterward. She tends a small garden of lemon basil and Thai chilies behind the house. She has never given a public interview in her life that mentioned my name. In 2019, her granddaughter, a 22-year-old university student, asked her, while filming a casual phone video, whether she had ever met me. Lek answered with the same sentence she had given the journalists in 1973. "There are no words in Thai to describe what I saw his hands do." Then, after a pause, she said something the journalists had never heard. The granddaughter's phone was still recording. The sentence was, "But I am still trying to find them." I have been asked, many times, what the most important fight of my life was. I have given many answers in my life. Some of them have been thoughtful, some of them have been polite. None of them have been honest. The most important fight of my life was an 8-second exchange in a warehouse in Thonburi, Bangkok, on the night of September 14, 1969, against a woman whose name no Western martial arts book has ever printed, in a private circuit that did not officially exist, in a building behind a temple that had no address. The fight was not won by speed. It was not won by strength. It was not won by anything I did inside the rope square. It was won by 40 minutes in the 3rd row. This is the principle that fight contained. The principle I have written down once, in a notebook in a drawer that has not been opened, and that Arthit wrote down once, in a sheet of paper in a wooden box that was buried with him. The principle is this: every fighter, at every level, prepares. The preparation is small. The preparation is unconscious. The preparation has been practiced so many times that it has become invisible to the fighter, to the trainer, to the corner, to everyone who is too close to see it. The preparation is visible from a distance. The higher the level of training, the more readable the preparation becomes, because the preparation has been drilled with the same precision as the technique itself. The greatest fighters are the most readable by anyone who knows where to stand. This is not only true in fighting, it is true in every craft. The painter who has painted 10,000 portraits has a brush tell. The pianist who has played the sonata 1,000 times has a hand tell. The negotiator who has closed 500 deals has a voice tell. The teacher who has taught the same lesson for 30 years has a pause tell, in the moment before the key sentence, that no student in the room can see, because the students are too close, and the teacher is too close to themselves, and the only person who could see it is a stranger sitting in the back row of the lecture hall, on a wooden bench, with their arms crossed on their knees. The preparation is always there. The preparation is always visible, from the right distance. There is, in Thonburi province, outside Bangkok, a small house where an 84-year-old woman drinks 1 cup of jasmine tea every morning at 6. She has won 67 professional fights. She has lost 0. She has never been touched by a man's hand in anger, except by 2 fingers at her collar, on the night of September 14th, 1969, for 1 second, in a warehouse behind a temple in Thonburi. She is still alive. She still trains. She still drinks the tea. She is still trying to find the words. And somewhere, in a drawer in a house in Hong Kong, in a notebook that has not been opened in 53 years, a sentence is still underlined. The preparation has been practiced as many times as the technique itself. I am Bruce Lee. I died on the 20th of July, 1973, 3 years, 10 months, and 6 days after the night I have just described. But Lek is still drinking the tea, and the 3rd row is still empty. Sit in it.